Coming up on today's edition of the Locked On Raiders podcast, with day one of mandatory minicamp in the books, I have 3 questions about this team. We'll talk about that plus a whole lot more coming up on Wednesday's edition of the Locked On Raiders podcast, June 7th, 2023.
Just win. Just win. Just win. Just win.
The autumn wind is a raider, pillaging just for fun. He'll knock you round and upside down and laugh when he's conquered and won. And won. And won. And won. And won.
And welcome here, Raider Nation, to another edition of the Locked On Raiders podcast. Thank you so much for making the show your first listen of the day. Make sure you subscribe or follow for free on YouTube or wherever you get podcasts to get the latest edition of the show as soon as it becomes available. And, of course, you're checking us out on YouTube. Many thanks to you, and many thanks to my man Ari, who does a great job each and every day making sure we're up on YouTube, looking good and sounding good. Does a great job, and we definitely appreciate him. You can check him out on Twitter at Ari Produces. If you want to hit me up on Twitter, you can, at your boy Q254. Want to get something in on the show, want to comment on the show, it is all good. And, of course, if you want to get some feedback in on the show, the Locked On Raider podcast voicemail line is always wide open like some old school TV antennas at 707-654-4693. Now, I'll let you know if you're going to leave a message, make sure you get it in 3 minutes or less. You have a 3-minute time limit. So if you're getting a little long-winded, make sure you cut that thing off before 3 minutes or it will hang up on you. So whatever the case may be, if you want to leave a message or send in a text message, you can. Again, 707-654-4693. Those calls and texts will come up in segment number 3. Segment number 2, talk about the 3 questions that I have about this Raiders team after mandatory minicamp day number 1 got wrapped up. And these questions aren't going to be answered right away. They're not answers that I can give you right away, but they're the 3 questions that I have about this Raiders unit, and then news and notes here in segment number 1. So let's go ahead and jump right into it. And off top, we'll be back out at the Intermountain Healthcare Performance Center, Raiders HQ, today for practice. Coach McDaniels, he talked on Tuesday. I was there for that. I wasn't there for practice. I had to go and be on the radio from 12 to 3:30 Pacific time, JT's show, and then on top of that, my show as well, little split show, and then we made way for Aces basketball. So, today, 10:15 to 12:30, we'll be out there. Practice will be open to the media. Then at 12:30, coaches and players will be made available. I don't know what coaches yet, don't know what players, but that's what will happen later on today. I'll be at the Intermountain Healthcare Performance Center for that. And, of course, whatever we get from that's good stuff, I'll definitely bring back to the podcast for tomorrow. And we'll have the same thing happen again on Thursday. As far as practice on Monday, when Coach McDaniels talked to us, he said that there was basically everybody was in attendance that needed to be in attendance at mandatory minicamp. And the one guy that he pointed out that wasn't there was Josh Jacobs. He basically said we have 100% attendance except for Josh Jacobs. Josh Jacobs doesn't have a contract, so he can't be there. He's holding on to the franchise tag. He has not signed it, has not signed a long-term deal. So, again, I explained it before mandatory minicamp. Didn't expect to see JJ out there. Of course, he has a new number when he finally does get out there. He's now number 8, but he's not out there just yet. But head coach Josh McDaniels is not worried about that. Everybody else, he said, was in attendance. Now, Tashawn Reed, who does a really good job from The Athletic, kind of going through the checklist and seeing and identifying the players that are out there. He pulls out his binoculars and is checking out each and every number, then checking it off on the roster. Does a great job of it. Does a better job than probably most people do. I got to give him a lot of credit for that. He tweeted out the guys that he did not see out there participating on the grass, which is tight end Michael Mayer, who, by the way, he doesn't have a contract yet. He hasn't signed his deal. Jacorian Bennett hasn't signed his deal yet either, and I'm pretty surprised by that. Jacorian Bennett's been playing at OTAs and practicing at OTAs. He's been doing a heck of a job. He wasn't out there. Tight end O.J. Howard wasn't out there. Wide receiver Jacoby Myers. Offensive tackle Justin Herron. Defensive end Tyree Wilson. And defensive end Jordan Willis. None of those guys were seen on the field. Doesn't mean that they weren't in the building. That's something that Coach McDaniels stressed to us last year. Just because you might not see them out there actually participating doesn't mean that they're not there. They're in the building. So he was very confident that all the players that needed to be there were there for mandatory minicamp. And I know a lot of people are concerned when it comes to Jimmy Garoppolo. Of course, he wasn't out there either participating. He was in the building. Here's what Ian Rappaport from NFL Network had to say about Jimmy G and the expectations for training camp.
Yeah, in fact, Jimmy Garoppolo had surgery to strengthen that foot. Remember, of course, broke that foot during the 2022 season. Obviously did not finish it. Still signed with the Raiders to a big deal. They ended up tinkering with that deal a little bit just to make sure sure that the Raiders are protected. Then he had surgery, and that led to all the questions you're referencing. Here is my understanding of where this stands. Based on the timeline at the time of the surgery, and based on the progress that he has showed, Jimmy Garoppolo is expected to be ready for the start of training camp. Barring any setbacks, he should be good to go. This is why the team has had confidence in him. This is certainly something that gives some optimism toward this situation. If he passes the physical, he gets all of his guaranteed money. This situation should be behind us. Meanwhile, Garoppolo has been there for every single second of the offseason program for the Raiders.
So kind of the common theme from Rap Sheet right there, basically saying the expectations are Jimmy G is going to be available for the beginning of training camp. And I feel like that's really kind of been the theme as of late. Again, he was at the Vegas Golden Knights games. He was out in the public looking very comfortable, walking around from everything that people say, no limp. He looked like he was, the guy. Not saying he can go out there and play a game of football right now, but it seems like he was trending in the right direction. Let's put it like that. So it sounds like all the to-do about him not possibly being ready for training camp it was a little bit overblown, as many people said here on the podcast, and called in and said, yeah, I don't think it's as serious as it sounds. And it sounds like most of those people were correct. So according to Rap Sheet, sounds like he's going to be ready for the beginning of training camp, which is a really big deal. Now, I did have a couple more sound bites that I wanted to play for you. This is from head coach Josh McDaniels, just a couple sound bites from mandatory minicamp day one when he met with the media before practice. And the first one is just about mandatory minicamp. What is the difference, if any? Is there a difference between OTAs, which we've seen the last few weeks, and Tuesday's mandatory minicamp?
Not really. I think the difference, we have a little bit more time, so we're actually going to get to watch the film in the afternoon. Like, if you ask me the biggest difference between minicamp and OTAs now, you're allotted a little bit more time on the field. We're not taking a lot more than what we've been doing. But the biggest thing for us is we'll be able to correct the film today. That's the biggest change. OTAs is a little bit of a challenge in that regard, because I'd say most of the days of the year, you're actually going through the work day, and whatever you're doing, then you watch that film afterward, correct it, and try to move on and have a clean slate the next day. OTAs isn't always that way, because of the time limits that we have. So that's a good thing for everybody, so that we can start hopefully fresh tomorrow and just start on the new material, whatever it is, and get going. So a little bit more time to watch the film. We'll have a chance to. Today happens to be the red zone. We're going to end up working a little bit more in the red zone. So, but other than that, the practice format's very similar.
So the biggest thing right there is just more time. That's the thing that he was stressing on, more time right there. The Raiders get to go over some film, kind of correct some things, and get back to work. So these mandatory minicamps, they're putting a lot of work in. And when I talked to wide receiver Jacoby Myers for the Raiders Roundtable when we were at Raiders Content Day on Tuesday, was it Tuesday? No, it was Monday. Man, these days fly by, right? Yeah, it was Monday. We had Raiders Content Day. He was saying, because I told him that it seemed like that they were moving from station to station, drill to drill pretty quickly. He said, we're out there running. They're putting in work out there, right? I know that this is just a small camp and it's not, pads popping or anything, but they're out there putting in some work. So getting the extra time to go over the film, see what they did wrong, see what they don't like, and be able to go back and correct it is really what mandatory minicamp is all about. And so speaking of pace, that was the question that I asked head coach Josh McDaniels myself, and you'll actually hear the question and his response about the pace of practice.
You mentioned pace earlier. How much different or how much more of a pace do you have from drill to drill now that it's year two for you and a lot of the returners?
Yeah, I think the guys, coaches and players, I think we all kind of know how we want to practice and work. We know the value of trying to get every ounce of, work done that we're allotted in terms of the time limits that we have. So, the guys do a great job of moving them from drill to drill. The players have really done a nice job of getting the drill set up so we can go ahead and start the repetitions and try to get better. So I think everybody, your second year, your second go around, you kind of know more, understand more. And then there's a lot more players now that can help other players because they've lived through it for a year and a half. So hopefully it's an efficient practice.
So there you go. With familiarity, everything could go a little bit quicker. They know how to coach these guys up a little bit more. They know exactly what they're trying to do. They're comfortable with them, and the players are comfortable with them. And it's the good thing the leaders, right? The guys like Crosby and Devontae Adams and Hunter Renfro and the guys that have been there, done that, the guys that, were there last year, the bigger players, the bigger name players are kind of leading the charge. So they're showing the guys that weren't there last year or aren't familiar with Josh McDaniels' system or his other coaches' system that how to do it and how to go. So it allows them to go and react and be a little bit quicker, something that I noticed from the OTAs that I was out there. And then one more question, one more soundbite I have from head coach Josh McDaniels at mandatory minicamp day one, the little media session that he had, was how he was able to get the big-time leaders that I just mentioned, the Crosbys, the Devontaes, the Renfros, guys like that, the bigger names. How did he get them to buy in, and the free agents that came to Vegas this offseason after a lackluster 2022?
I think the first thing we all have to do is be accountable, and that starts with me. And ways that I can do a better job of trying to do my job and help them be a better football team, help them be better players. I think our staff did the same thing, took a good look at ourselves. What can we do better to help our team? We're in a lot of close games. That's been very well documented. And, so when you're in those kind of close games, you're always, fighting to figure out how you can finish them on the right end. And so, we've made some changes that we hope would be for the better. We've also, tried to be accountable to our responsibility and role in that. And I think being honest with the players and having great lines of communication with them is always the right thing to do. Tell them the truth, encourage them. We have a great working environment, positive attitude, great leadership on our team. And so we've just tried to feed into that, and, we're working really hard. We got a long way to go. Nothing's been accomplished yet, but I think the right things are at least being attempted at this point in time of the year, and we're going to try to continue to do that here going into training camp.
Thought that was a really good question right there. Matter of fact, Omar Ruiz from NFL Network was the one who asked him that question. I thought that was really good. And, for Josh McDaniels to say that, it takes accountability and it all starts with me. And, I had to look myself in the mirror and see what I did wrong and see how I can improve. I think that's a step in the right direction. Now, of course, anyone could say, well, that could be coach speak. Maybe he doesn't mean it. He just is my way or the highway type guy. And maybe you're right. But it sounded good when he said it about being accountable and all other coaches being accountable as well, and knowing what they did really well, knowing what they didn't do really well, and how they could do things better. And if you do things better, the little things better in 2023, then the little small mistakes that they made that may have cost them some games maybe turns in their favor in 2023. Again, it's just something to pay attention to and see how the sausage is made, right? How everything is really put together. So that's what I got for you for segment number one of today's Locked On Raiders podcast. Kind of news and notes of the day. Coming up in segment number two, 3 questions I have as mandatory minicamp day one got wrapped up. We'll talk about those 3 questions, and we'll do it after I tell you about the title sponsor, which is Bird Dogs. And Bird Dogs is back. I check out their website right now, birddogs.com. They've got shorts, they've got pants, they've got polos. I'm looking at them all right now. Khaki shorts. I'm a big khaki short guy, especially on the weekend and I'm not working. Love to be comfortable. Bird Dogs are so comfortable. They got the built-in liner for comfort, so you really can't go wrong. The shorts that they have all kind of different styles, from khaki shorts, gym shorts. They got bathing suits. They've got liners. They've just got anything you want. And if you want pants, you can get those. They have sweatpants, joggers, stretchy khakis. They have all kind of different options for you, but they're all built for comfort. And that's all we want to be. At least that's all I want to do. I always get clothes that are comfortable. That's all I care about at this stage of the game. I want shoes that are comfortable at all times. I want shorts that are comfortable at all times. I want shirts that are comfortable. Everything. Look, and they look good on top of that. That's the thing about it. They look really good. So if you're looking for some really good, comfortable shorts, pants, polos, whatever the case may be, you don't have to worry about draws. You got liners in it as well. So they're a lot more, like I said, comfortable, which is important, and affordable. You got to check out Bird Dogs, and you got to check them out today. And again, they've got plenty of specials. If you go to birddogs.com/LockedOnNFL, you enter the promo code LockedOnNFL, you're going to get a free Yeti-style tumbler with your orders. Again, birddogs.com/LockedOnNFL for a free Yeti-style tumbler. They're very comfortable. You won't want to take them off. Check them out again today, birddogs.com. All right, Raider Nation, here we go. Segment number 2 of today's Locked On Raiders podcast. Want to jump into 3 questions that I had as mandatory minicamp day number 1 got wrapped up. Just 3 questions about this Raiders team. And off top, let me tell you, these 3 questions cannot be answered today. They can't be answered tomorrow. They can't be answered in training camp. They can't be answered until the regular season happens. Then at some point, we can look back and say, okay, I know the answer to these questions. There'll be some time during the regular season, but it'll be something to come back to. Now, I'll give suggestions on who I think it could be, but I can't give you an automatic answer. I can't give you a definite answer right now, and this has to do with players and also just style of play for this Raiders team. So these answers won't really be given right now, but I can always give suggestions. So here in segment number 2, I'll give you 3 questions that I have about this team, and I have an asterisk, a player to pay attention to as training camp's going on, mandatory mini camps going on, training camp, preseason, all that good stuff, and see how they do this upcoming year. 3 questions and an asterisk for a player to pay attention to. And, of course, I'd love some feedback as well. 707-654-4693. 3 questions that you have about this Raiders team as mandatory minicamp is going on, as they get ready for training camp a little bit later on, and then, of course, preseason and the regular season. And it's funny, I actually had this as a subject on my radio show on Tuesday on Raider Nation Radio 920, but just didn't feel like I had a very good show. Like, I'll be the first to tell you that it just wasn't a very good show, from going from the facilities to the radio station to having a couple meetings that ran long. And just, I don't know, just something didn't seem right. It seemed like I was rushed, wasn't too happy with it. But then I went home and did ESPN radio. Freddie and Fitzsimmons did a show with Freddie Coleman. It was great. And so got into a much better headspace after that. So it's always good when you have a bad show to just go and have another show, right, and hope that it's not a bad one. So let's go ahead and jump into the 3 questions that I have. And the first and foremost one is, who's going to be the most impactful rookie in 2023? If you think about their rookie class for 2022, Dylan Parham was the guy that got the most burn. He was obviously the most impactful. The Raiders didn't have a normal draft class. They gave up their first-round pick and their second-round pick in the Davante Adams trade. I'm good with that. I'm fine with that. They also got some production out of Thayer Munford, the 7th-round pick. So the offensive linemen got some really good burn in 2022. And then the defensive tackles in Neil Farrell Jr. and Matthew Butler, not so much. Zamir White, Britton Brown, the running backs, not so much. So the most impactful player in their rookie class last year was definitely Dylan Parham. And then you'd have to say Thayer Munford was second. Well, now they have a full allotment of draft class players, right? 9 guys they selected. Who's going to be the most impactful? Will it be Tyree Wilson, Michael Mayer, Byron Young, Trey Tucker, Jacorian Bennett, Aiden O'Connell, Christopher Smith, Amari Burney, Nesta Jade Silvera? That's their draft class. Of course, they have undrafted free agents as well, but I'm really kind of focusing on the guys that they selected, right? Who they picked with their draft capital. And I'm looking at Michael Mayer. That's the guy that I think is going to have the biggest impact his rookie year for the Raiders. I just think that he brings a lot to the table, from catching the ball. No, he's not a dynamic route runner like a Darren Waller. He's not a wide receiver in a tight end's body. He's not the most athletic dude, but he finds ways to get open. He makes a nice target for the quarterback. I think he'll be a good security blanket for Jimmy G. He's a good blocker who can obviously improve, and he's really good in the red zone. Was great in the red zone at Notre Dame. So that's the one I'm looking at, Michael Mayer, as the guy who I believe is going to be the most impactful rookie for the Raiders. But it's a wait-and-see type thing. Second question, what difference does a year make for players returning and coach being in year 2? This is Coach McDaniel's year 2 with the Raiders. How much better is he? Right? I mean, it's not just on the players, it's on the coaches as well. And as you heard in segment number 1, he knows he made mistakes. So how much better is he as the head man of the Silver and Black in year 2 as opposed to year 1? How much better will these players that are returning, like Max Crosby, like Chandler Jones, like Hunter Renfro, like Davante Adams, all these guys that are very comfortable or at least been in the system a year, Trayvon Merrick, how much better do they get? That's a guy that really needs a big season, is Trayvon Merrick. So how much better can they be? How much better can the offensive line be now that it's basically one cohesive unit? You know who's going to be the starting 5, or at least you feel comfortable with who's going to be the starting 5. How much better can they be in year 2? And then my final question, how much more of the playbook is opened up with Jimmy G under center? You heard Rap Sheet in segment number 1 talk about he should be available for training camp when it opens up. So how much does the playbook open up? How much of the playbook was being used with Derek Carr under center, where I think that, and I've said it many times, I think Derek Carr is a better quarterback. I just think that Jimmy G may be better for Josh McDaniels for this system. And we've already had plenty of debates about Carr and Jimmy G and all that other stuff. I'll die on the hill thinking that Carr's the better quarterback, no doubt. But Jimmy G is better for Josh McDaniels in this system because, well, he's obviously more comfortable with them. So how much more of the playbook is opened up? How does Jimmy G kind of navigate through the playbook. What does the offense look like? I think it has an opportunity to be really good with the weapons that they have, the players that they have, the offensive line coming back for a second year. I think things could be really good, but obviously you need Jimmy G under center, and that playbook opened up to see, especially in the red zone, how much better they can be. So those are the 3 questions that I have for the Raiders. What are your 3 questions? Again, 707-654-4693. Before we get to segment number 3, I did have the asterisk, the player to look out for, and that's linebacker Divine Diablo. He's a guy who's bulked up. They're calling him Big Swole. I like that. Can he turn into the guy that they want him to be? He's a guy that's going to be wearing the green dot, or at least he's in the running to be wearing the green dot, which is the quarterback of the defense. He's obviously a guy that has a lot of production when it comes to tackling. He got injured last year and missed the rest of the season, but he's going into year number 3. So Divine Diablo is a guy that a lot of folks are talking about could be a big-time player for the Raiders upcoming this season in year 2 under Patrick Graham. Here's Coach McDaniels from the media session on Tuesday talking about linebacker Divine Diablo.
Divine's, he's I'm fond of Divine. I think he knows that, and we've given him a lot of responsibility. He's wearing the green dot, in practice, which is obviously a role that, young players, once they have that on their shoulders, now they're responsible for more than just their job. They have to communicate to everyone else. They have to be alert and aware of situational football because they're essentially the quarterback of the defense once you have that responsibility. So Divine's grown literally every week since I've seen him and known him. He works really hard at the game of football. I think he's embraced this year as a year that, is a growth year for him. Not only on the field in terms of what he does on the field, but also how he can impact others. And I think that's something that you see from him every day.
So there you go right there. Coach McDaniels talking about Divine Diablo. So that's the player to pay attention to. That's my asterisk here in segment number 2. I gave you the 3 questions, gave you the player to look for, to pay attention to. I'll be paying attention to Divine Diablo. Really would like to see him be a successful player. I like him. I think he brings a lot to the table. He's got to stay healthy, so he's bulked up. Right, but he also wants to still be fast. He's a converted safety, so he's one of those guys that is supposed to be able to cover. He was able to get his hands on the ball at Virginia Tech as a safety. Can he turn that into some production at the linebacker position with the silver and black? Something to pay attention to throughout minicamp, throughout training camp, throughout preseason, and, of course, into the regular season. That's what I got for you for segment number 2 of today's Locked On Raiders podcast. Coming up next, we got your calls and texts straight off that Locked On Raider podcast voicemail line, 707-654-4693. This is the Locked On Raiders podcast. Here we go, Raider Nation. Segment number 3 of today's Locked On Raiders podcast. Your calls and texts straight off that Locked On Raider podcast voicemail line, 707-654-4693. Let's start things off with Missouri Raider. He's calling to talk about Hunter Renfro and what happens if the Raiders wait until next year to move on from him. Here he is, Missouri Raider.
Hey, Q, Missouri Raider here. I just listening to the Monday podcast and brought up the Hunter Renfro jerseys being on sale, and I could see it going either way as well, with him possibly being traded. I kind of hope he's not. I'd like to see what they do with all of them healthy there. But anyway, I wanted to see what your thoughts were, or do you know, how does it help us next year? If we're not signing anybody else free agent-wise right now or not looking to, then it doesn't really matter if we save money on Renfro's salary this year. So does it help us at all next year, or can they just get him off the books after this year if it doesn't pan out? Just curious of that because, free agencies, I know there's still some people out there, still some veterans out there that haven't been signed, but unless the Raiders are targeting one and just don't have the money for him, it seems like there's no point in getting rid of Renfro at this point. So anyway, I'd love to hear what your thoughts are on that, and if you know if it would save us any money next year or anything. Love the show. Thanks.
Thank you so much for the call, my man. And, there's a bunch of different reports on how much the Raiders could save if they were to trade Hunter Renfro. Obviously, it'd be a post-June 1st trade at this point to a team like maybe the Saints, the Falcons, a couple other teams out there that could be desperate or looking for another weapon in the slot. I look at it like this. I don't think at this stage of the game, and I talked about this on my radio show on Tuesday. It's funny we're talking about it right now. I don't think at this stage of the game it's the value is even there to trade Hunter Renfro. I really don't. I mean, I don't know who they're going to go out and get that's going to be an impactful player with the money that they may save from moving on from Hunter Renfro. And he hasn't really had an opportunity to show what he could be in this offense as a healthy Hunter Renfro. I think that it's worth giving it a shot to see what a healthy Hunter Renfro looks like, to see if you can make it work. We've seen slot receivers in Josh McDaniel's system be really good. I think Hunter could be that guy. So why move on from him now? It's already June 7th, right? Unless something really big comes up and you can really get a nice return for him, and you have an idea of what you're going to get instead of him, like who you're going to bring in instead of him, I don't see the value in moving on from him right now. If you're going to move on from him, maybe move on from him next year after you've gone through this season and realize, okay, he doesn't fit with what we want to do. I think it makes the most sense just to hold on to him. But we'll see what happens. There is a little bit of savings if they do trade him, but I don't think it's enough right now at this stage of the game to be that big a deal. So thank you so much for that call. I do appreciate you. Next up, got a text from John from the South Bay in L.A. So what's up, what's cracking, Q? I appreciate all your efforts and the fact that we can count on you each and every day. The grind ain't easy, and just know we see you working even on days when maybe you don't feel up for it, especially considering all your obligations. Anyway, my question for the younger generation of the nation, maybe this millennium, why? Why do you support, root, fan for this team? What's your connection and reasoning? Because we all know it's been bleak for a long time. For us older fans, there was a time when the Raiders were a commitment to excellence, pride and poise, just win, baby, and the winningest professional franchise in all sports. The Raiders won a lot. No other fan base could really beat that. But now, not so much. So what is the reason for sticking with the Raiders now for young fans? What's the attachment, if any? Is it the uniform, players, Las Vegas, their history? Just curious. I just can't imagine rooting for a team that quite possibly lost a lot for a fan's entire life. So what's keeping the young fans around, if anything? That's John from the South Bay in L.A. Thanks for the text, my man. Good stuff. Great question. I think it's very valid, right? And I can actually probably answer the question as well. And again, I say it all the time. I mean, even at my age of 46 going on 47 in November, the last time the Raiders won was 83. I was 7. I wasn't really locked in on the Raiders, this and that. And, I wasn't hung up on everything that they did at that point. I was probably watching because my mom was watching, my dad was watching, but not because I was like, oh, man, the Raiders are playing, I got to watch. But I'll say for the younger generation, at least the answer I can give is a lot of it is just born into them, right? That's just how they're raised. Isn't that what we say? That, we raise our kids the right way by making sure that they're Raider fans? I know that's what I've done, right? My kids knew that it was Raider fans or nothing, right? I mean, you ain't rooting for nobody if you're not rooting for the Raiders. And luckily, they were silly enough to follow me, right? In blind faith, they were like, all right, well, I guess he knows what he's talking about. And unfortunately for them, they haven't been rewarded yet. And I think that that's a lot of it. I think a lot of it is the mystique of what the Raiders can be if they ever get back. Again, I can't answer for the fans, the younger fans that haven't seen anything or know anything really about the Raiders. That I feel like there's a lot of different reasons why fans are fans of the team. I don't think the Las Vegas factor has a whole lot to do with it. I know being here in Las Vegas, there's fans that are growing and starting to learn about the Raiders that weren't necessarily Raider fans, but they want to support their home team. I just think for the most part, man, it's a family thing. I really do. Now, again, anyone else could answer that has a better idea, but I just think that it's something that, it's kind of grown up in your family, right? I mean, it's passed down, Pops passes it down to you or Mom's passes it down to you, and then you pass it down and this, that, and the other, and just goes on and so forth. And it's just one of those things. In our house, we root for the Raiders, right? And I think that that's how it is in a lot of houses. But, John, it's a great question, and would love to hear some answers from other folks out there, not named me. So thank you for that. I do appreciate you. Next up, got a call from Raider Eddie in Denver. He's calling to talk about the Raiders and how he's looking at them similar to how he looks at the Miami Heat. Here's Raider Eddie in Denver.
Hey, Q, what's up? This is Raider Eddie in Denver. Love your show as always, the platform, the discussion, the debate, even when people don't agree. So I want to compare the Raiders to the Heat. Okay, I'm not saying the Raiders are going to make the championship game like the Heat have made the finals, the NBA finals this year. But I do want to say that sometimes a team can get hot, right? And I think that's actually what happened with the Raiders in 1983. I don't believe we were expected to do a whole lot. We had Jim Plunkett, who was a guy that had been injured, oft injured, not successful, and was a journeyman at that point. In 1983, we were the best team at the end of the season, and we won. We won that Super Bowl. And so you fast forward to right now, the Raiders, the expectations from outside the building are very, very low. But at the end of the day, you have to get on the field and compete. And I think that's one of the things that I love about sports is you just never know what's going to happen. And again, I do think there's another example of exactly that with the Heat this year, a team that just didn't quite have it together until the playoffs. A few games before the playoffs, they started to click. The one thing I will say is that the Heat and Eric Spoelstra have a great coach. And if McDaniels can be that for us, which I think is possible, he hasn't shown it yet as a head coach, but I think it's possible that he can be a great coach. Then you never know what can happen with this team. We could go very far. One last thing that I'll throw out there is for people that are impatient with McDaniels, you look at Mike Shanahan, a great head coach in the NFL. You look at Bill Belichick. They were not successful until they didn't have a winning head coaching season. Shanahan didn't until year 5. And with Belichick, I think he only had one winning season in his first 6 or 7 years. You can double check that if you want, but I'm pretty certain I'm close on that. At least the first year out of his first 1 year out of his first 6 years, he had a winning season in Belichick that is. So, let's just see what happens. I always get a little more excited in the off season because we get further away from our last miserable, record. And I think most NFL fans kind of try to look for hope, in the off season maybe, or maybe not. But I love the show as always. Just want to see what other people think, and love the show. All right, bye.
Thank you for the call, my man. I appreciate you. And the Heat have a great culture, right? They're on a hell of a run right now. They really have the Nuggets up against it. Of course, Game 3 is tonight. Denver, in my opinion, has to win it. If they don't win Game 3, then the Heat have them right where they want them. They're going to make them uncomfortable. And when the Heat make a team uncomfortable, well, you see what happens. I love the comparison and the conversation about the Heat, not because I think that the Raiders are in a position to be similar to them, but the fact that I would love the Raiders to be in a position similar to them, if you know what I mean. Like, I would love to know that the Raiders are going to build something and have that Heat culture, and I say that in air quotes, but they have that culture, and I believe it starts with Pat Riley, right? Pat Riley, the great Pat Riley, has been in that organization for a long, long time, and even when they had LeBron and D. Wade and Chris Bosh, they needed someone that can manage those egos. Eric Spoelstra, really good coach, but was he the one managing the egos, or was it Pat Riley in the background pulling some strings? Me personally, I believe it was Pat Riley who's been there, done that with a bunch of egos. Remember, he coached the Showtime Lakers, coached the Knicks, right? He coached the Heat himself for a while. So he kind of knew about managing egos. So I think that helped in a major way, and it helped start establishing that Heat culture that they call it. That is a real thing there in Miami. I would love for the Raiders to establish a Raiders culture, right? I might not even be willing to sacrifice a few years of not so successful football if I knew that they were developing a culture that was similar to the Heat culture. I really would, because that Heat culture is for real. That's something that I'm very impressed by. So good stuff, man. Great call. I do appreciate you. Like I said, I wouldn't compare the two teams because I don't think that they're in the same place. I think that the Heat are in a much different place than the Raiders are, but I would love to see the Raiders in that place sooner rather than later. Thank you so much for that call again. I do appreciate you. We'll close things out with a text from Southern Indiana Raiders. It says, hey, Q, Southern Indiana Raider here. I listened to today's pod like always. Heard a dude calling for patience. As a fan of this team since 1976, I'm officially out of patience. I had high hopes that these guys got it. I'm actually starting to think that they don't. They have mishandled the quarterback position, drafted an injured player in the first round this year. They're definitely afraid of getting a good linebacker, and I don't understand it. I want to be upbeat and positive, but so far I'm not seeing it. I guess there's time, but if Garoppolo is the starter, then I'm underwhelmed. That's Southern Indiana Raider. Thanks so much for the text. And that's what I was talking about on yesterday's show. It's hard to tell a Raider fan to be patient, right? Because Raider fans have been patient for so long. It doesn't matter who the coach is, doesn't matter who the GM is, doesn't matter what the players that put the uniform on. Raider fans have been patient each and every year saying, okay, this will be the year, right? Gone through Jack Del Rio, gone through John Gruden 2.0, gone through, the coaching staff that, who was it now? Oh, Rich Bisaccia. Geez, no disrespect to Rich. He eats for free in Vegas. Went through Rich Bisaccia, and now we're on Josh McDaniels. And I know a lot of people weren't big fans of Coach McDaniels and everyone coming over from New England when they did. But I think for the most part, everyone would be happy if the team just won. But it's been so long since they just won. It's been ridiculous. I mean, even going back to the text that we had about, just win, baby, commitment to excellence, the most winningest franchise. I remember there was a time when the Raiders were that team that had the highest winning percentage in sports. I remember there was a time of that. Obviously, it's not any time now, anytime recent, but there was a time when that was a real fact. I remember when they were the most winningest football team on Monday Night Football, right? They had the best winning percentage. There were so many stats and so many boxes you could check off with the Raiders that you can't do now because it's been years on top of years on top of years of losing. So it's hard to anyone to come out and fix their face and say, well, just be patient. Because, man, it seems like we as fans, again, before podcasting and radio and all that other stuff, as fans feel like we've been patient forever. Our patience is wearing really thin. So where I would agree and say that you should be patient, I understand why you don't want to be patient, right? Because, hell, been patient for a very long time. So it's like I said, I'm not going to be the one to tell the fan base to be patient. Actually, what I'm going to do is root for this coaching staff to figure it out, Jimmy G to be healthy, this offense to look really good, and the defense be better than they were a year ago so they could win some games so Raider Nation could actually be rewarded, because at the end of the day, that's all that matters. Raider Nation needs to be rewarded for their patience, for their faithfulness, for their loyalty, for all the blood, sweat, and tears that they have rocking the silver and black and supporting their team. Raider Nation needs to be rewarded. Not the players, not the coaches, not the owner, but the fans. They are the ones. You are the ones that need to be rewarded for everything that you've put into this. Obviously not on the field. I get that. The players are doing that. But the support is always there. It's never wavering. On the road, when I go on road trips, I see Raider Nation. When I'm at Allegiant Stadium, I see Raider Nation. Raider Nation is everywhere, and that is something that's pretty impressive. The team might not be overwhelming, but I'll tell you what, the fan base sure in the hell is. And so salute to Raider Nation each and every day for what you bring to the table. And that's all I got for today's show here on the Locked On Raiders podcast for this Wednesday, June 7th. Coming up tomorrow, we'll have some reaction from mandatory minicamp day number 2, more calls and texts, more news and notes, and, of course, plenty of conversation here as we do each and every day. So until then, Raider Nation, take care of yourself, take care of your family, love on your family. Most importantly, as always, just win, baby.